Hi guys, I'm just coming on live. I was gonna try something. I just want to see if my Facebook Live is working. So if you can see this or you're watching, just say hello in the comments and I will see if I can see you back. And if I can, then we can do a little session. Hi Ruda, how are you? How you doing? How's your weekend been? So I was going to watch a video of BF Skinner on counseling from YouTube. And I was wondering if anyone wants to watch it along, comment, ask questions. We can have a little discussion. Hi, Yeshim. Hi, Stuart. Hi, Bella. Hi, Jocelyn. Hi, Jill. Hi, Sandy. Hi, Anne. Hi, Vicky. Hi, Fiona. Cool. So you guys can see me. We're working again. Last time I had some techie issues when came online, but now we're working. So this is all good. So the next thing is I'm going to try playing a video. Can you guys hear the video clearly if I play it? And can you see it? I'm just going to try and put it on screen and see what you guys think. Hi, Manako from New Zealand. Hi, Alison.
Walden 2.
Hi, Nuria.
And Beyond Freedom and Dignity.
Okay, could anyone hear that video playing and can you see the video? Amazing, Stuart. Thank you. Stuart says yes, working. Jill says yes, perfect. So this is great. Okay, so technology is on our side. It's working. I am happy. This is great. Hi to Vaughn in Dubai. Hello, how are you? Hi, June. Hi, Nan. Hi, Sandy. Hi, Sally. Hi, Penny. Hi, Matt. Okay, guys, if you just joined, what we're going to do is I'm going to listen to and watch a video and we're going to do it together because technology is working. So it's on YouTube. It's this video I really, really like. I use it in some of my workshops. If you guys want to watch the original video, you can see it on the Skinner Foundation. I've posted a link on the comment section, so you should be able to click on that and see the original video. You'll be able to watch it on the screen as I play it. So what we're going to do is we'll watch the video. If you guys have questions, post a question. As soon as I see them, I'll try and pause the video. We can have a little chat and see how it goes. Hi, Nando. How are you? Okay, so...
Dr. B.F. Skinner, professor of psychology at Harvard University, has authored such important scientific books as The Behavior of Organisms, Science and Human Behavior, Verbal Behavior, Cumulative Record, The Technology of Teaching, and Contingencies of Reinforcement. In addition, he has written 2 books of general interest which have been both widely received and highly controversial: the novel Walden 2 and Beyond Freedom and Dignity. Included in the many scientific awards bestowed upon him are the Distinguished Scientific Award of the American Psychological Association, membership in the National Academy of Sciences, and the President's Medal of Science. In this film, Dr. Skinner addresses himself to some of the most important questions facing the counseling profession. A decade ago, Dr. Skinner indicated that he did not believe the fields of counseling and psychotherapy were ready to use his techniques.
So if you guys aren't aware, I'm a massive Skinner fan. I love Skinner's work. And so Claire says, I can't tell if I'm watching this live. Hopefully, Claire, you can see me pausing the video and having a chat now, so you are watching it live. Hi, Claire. another Claire. Hi, Vicky. So perfect. So I love Skinner's work. The more I learn, the more I'm fascinated. Now, there's lots of people who might say it's out of date. And yeah, I'm sure there's lots of stuff that Skinner said and the original works that you can grow on and develop and look at with a different perspective now. More research and work has come out, and so we can build on the work that Skinner sort of really highlighted the work of people before him as well, like Thorndike, Watson, and many others. But I do think there's a huge misunderstanding. I go to so many academic lectures, hearing general people talk about things and talk about Skinner, and often you hear things like people going, Skinner just talked about a black box. Skinner didn't believe that animals or people have emotions or feelings. Skinner didn't believe that any of it was relevant. He didn't study emotions at all. And a lot of this stuff isn't actually true. And I think there's a huge misunderstanding of what behavior science and behavior analysis, operant learning is all about. And for me, it's an area that I'm hugely passionate about. It's not to say that the other fields aren't important, but I'm in this video focusing on just watching this video by Skinner and talking from a behavior analytic perspective. So yeah, and often in the evenings or night times, this is the kind of stuff I do. So I just thought, why not let's see if you guys want to join along.
We join Dr. Skinner and Dr. John M. Whiteley of Washington University as they are discussing how Dr. Skinner would assess developments in the past decade.
Now, I feel that a great deal has been done, first of all, for the management of institutionalized psychotics and retardates, but much more is being done in face-to-face counseling, and rather along the lines that I would like to see developed further. I think an understanding of the importance of the consequences of behavior is now much farther advanced than I would have guessed in the time which has elapsed, and the realization that much more is to be gained by looking at the environment of a person rather than at his feelings and his...
What? Okay, guys, don't freak out. I know he's just said that. Don't freak out. It's okay. Just take a deep breath. Just make sure you breathe all the way deep. Now, Skinner did just say that. Let's just go back a couple of seconds.
Much more is to be gained by looking at the environment of a person rather than at his feelings and his states of mind and things of that kind.
What are the...
Okay, but just wait for it. Wait, let's just listen to it a little bit further and see what he says.
deficiencies with analyzing the feelings or states of mind? How do you translate somebody's problems who come in that way into a system that you can use to help them with what they see as feeling problems?
Well, the complaint is very real, of course. People suffer from pain, they suffer from anxiety, they suffer from fears. These are feelings. That's the thing that is most important to the individual.
So I think this is a really important point here is so there's no denial of emotions or feelings or states, and people have feelings. These are really important to that person feeling, experiencing that experience. Yeah, having that experience. And so, but in terms of Skinner here is talking about counseling as a profession and use of sort of operant conditioning, behavior science and counseling. He's going, maybe we need to look at feelings in a slightly different way in relation to this.
Actually, unless these interfere with his behavior, we'll usually allow him to go on suffering. But if he can't keep a job because of this, or he can't exist as a father or a husband or something of that kind because of these feelings, then people urge him to get help. And he comes to the counselor.
So This is so important here because we see the same. A lot of us work with human caregivers of many different animal species. And as I said in my Facebook Live the other night, humans are animals. Do you get what I mean? Like the human animals and the non-human animals. And so people come, and so this is true for non-humans and humans. But a lot of times you might have a dog who, if the outward behavior isn't an issue, obviously we can't speak to them and say, how are you feeling? But the dog might be feeling sad, upset, depressed, whatever, and nothing is done unless it's a problem to other people, to other animals. The animal often goes on suffering, and that's the same with people too.
With a very real problem, and it has the form of a feeling. But what the counselor is to do is not to change the feeling as such, but to change what is felt, and that is the condition of the
That is, like, to me, that is such a nuanced way of saying it, but so important. So let's just listen to that again.
real problem, and it has the form of a feeling. But what the or something of that kind, because of these feelings, then people urge him to get help. And he comes to the counselor with a very real problem, and it has the form of a feeling. But what the counselor...
Okay, so the caregiver comes to us. I'm translating this to caregiver, and it could be, we could talk about a human person as well. So a caregiver comes to us. My dog is feeling fearful. So they come to us in the form on describing the form of their interpretation of what the dog's feeling. Now, we don't know what the dog's feeling, but that person has labeled it as fear. Someone else might call it anxiety. Someone else might call it the dog's frustrated. Depending on their learning experiences, how they use those labels, there will be those different labels. But the animal's having a feeling, and the animal never stops having feelings, just like humans. We're always feeling stuff. So we're going to be feeling joy, sadness, relax. There's so many other things we're going to feel. We're not just going to, it's not, you don't turn it on and off. Like you're an emotional being all the time. And that's what animals are as well. Well, humans, animals, do you get what I mean? Non-human animals are as well.
is to do is not to change the feeling as
So the counselor's job is not to change the feeling
such, but to change what is felt.
But to change what is felt. Okay, so our job is not to change the feeling, but what is felt.
That is the condition of the individual, his behavior in the world in which he must exist. It's a good deal like the problem of a person with a toothache. When you go to the dentist with a toothache, you're going because of a feeling. But the dentist doesn't work on the feeling, he works on the tooth.
Why can't
The dentist doesn't work on the feeling, he works on the tooth. So you go to a dentist because you've got a pain. I was actually at the dentist last week, or the week before, because I had a huge amount of pain. I went to emergency dentist, had to have a root canal. Well, they started a root canal. I need to go back in a couple of weeks to finish it off. But I went because there was a pain. But the dentist didn't per se treat my pain. They treated the environment, the tooth. And by removing the nerve and working on that tooth, the pain stopped. And so when Skinner says, the counselor's job is not necessarily what we're looking at is how do you change the conditions? And so the animal's feeling something, so we don't need to necessarily go into, okay, the animal is feeling, we're going to label it as fearful. Now, do I need to understand that fear and go in and have a discussion with the dog and go, tell me about your fear? Or do I need to go and investigate the fear more? Or do I, by understanding what is it in the conditions that is causing the animal to feel fearful and show the behaviors that the animal's doing? And by changing that environment, the animal feels differently as well.
Can't you help somebody by focusing on their feelings?
Well, you can learn a great deal about asking a person about his feelings, but if it can lead you to overlook other things about him. He's much more aware of his feelings than he is of what happened to him 5 days ago or something, which is explaining those feelings.
So again, we can ask someone about their feelings. Now with dogs, that's much harder to do, or cats, much harder to do. And so we go, okay, tell me about your feelings if it's a human being. And so I might ask someone, and so John says to me, well, I feel anxious. Okay, so tell me about that. Well, it really causes me discomfort and pain and blah, blah. And John can say whatever he wants about what John has labeled as his feeling of anxiety or fear. However, by understanding that, is that going to help us help John? Or is it going to help us help John to understand what changes occur? And these could be changes in the environment, so external environment and internal environment. And so what changes actually result in that feeling of anxiety or that fearful feeling? And then how can we teach John to be able to change or manage some of those environments? And it may not be as easy as said, but that starts. And like Skinner's saying, we're far more aware of how we feel and the labels that we use for those feelings than we are potentially as to what's caused them. So when you're a child and we start labeling, oh, you feel sad, that's okay, you feel sad. Or do we teach the individual, okay, so you feel sad and it's okay to feel sad, but what is it in the environment that's causing the feeling of sadness? And what else can you do to change the environment to help you feel differently? And so if we started to maybe start teaching that aspect of looking at it, as opposed to just going, okay, you feel sad, we're just going to focus on the sadness, as opposed to going, okay, we feel sad. What is it? What can I do? What is it in the environment that's causing that? And how can we make changes to that environment to help us feel differently? That's way more empowering and way more like beneficial. And so I think that's really important when we look at this.
He's forgotten that happened. He can tell you about the feeling. You've got to guess about his history. But if you can get him to talk about what has happened, you get away from the feelings to the things which have produced the condition which is felt. And I think if you take feelings to be the essential subject matter of counseling or therapy, you're likely to overlook the real world. And you try to interpret feelings and try to argue that one feeling leads to another, that feelings of frustration lead to feelings of aggression. Before you know it, you're working in a psychic world of some kind in which there's no contact with reality whatsoever. And that, I think, is misleading. It diverts attention away from the kinds of things which would be much more usefully identified and changed.
Well, what do you do to change behavior?
The feelings of frustration lead to feelings of aggression.
So there's 2 points there. So the first point is, Skinner said, we're not as aware of identifying our environments and observing what's happened, what changes in environments led to the way we feel. So we can describe or talk about our feelings. And often, if I think about it from a verbal response perspective, how many times when you start going, oh, I feel upset or sad, how much reinforcement potentially do you receive? How many reinforcers are available in the environment from people's responses? Compared to, and I think we shape a lot of those behaviors with verbal repertoires with people. And so by teaching our caregivers, our pet owners, they say, oh, my puppy feels frustrated or my puppy feels sad in this situation. Okay, now I understand that. So do you notice what changes occur when the puppy starts feeling, like, why does the puppy start feeling sad? And not because of some story inside of the puppy, but what is actually changing? Well, when I leave the puppy for 6 hours a day, or if I take the puppy's bone away, or if I hold the puppy back and when he wants to say hello to his puppy friend or wants to say hello to my children when they come into the house, that leads to my puppy, what I label feeling frustrated, and also a number of other behaviors occur. And if we break it down from that perspective, we can see that potentially we have different things going on that we can observe. So we can observe an extinction procedure happening. We can observe some negative reinforcers potentially, or positive reinforcing environment. And those things are also going to have, so you're going to have the behaviors that occur, the consequences and the outcomes, but also the animal is going to be experiencing feelings. And you can't access those feelings directly in the jobs that we do, but what we can do is understand what contingencies are at play. So what BC relations, so the animal does a behavior, there's extinction, positive punishment, negative reinforcement, negative punishment, what's occurring, and that can also give us information as to what does the animal get out of this behavior. And I think it's so ethical. It's unethical if we don't do that, because if a dog's jumping up and I don't start to look at, okay, what's happening in the behavior and the consequence. So the animal jumps up and they escape other puppies running towards them or running around them. Or puppy could be jumping up because when they jump up, they get attention, like social attention, treats. Now, both of those things are really important, because a puppy who's jumping up as they get attention, that tells me the puppy is working for attention. So let's give them more attention. So by actually understanding behavior and consequence, it's not about sticking something in an operant square or a quadrant. It's about actually understanding what the learner is getting from that behavior, what is maintaining that behavior. And by understanding that, we can actually provide the learner opportunities either to get more of that. So if a puppy jumps up because that's how they get attention, and we go, okay, is the puppy getting enough attention throughout the day? So if we provide more attention contingent on other behaviors, 4 feet on the floor, on your bed, doing other things, lying on the sofa, we may get less jumping up. The other way is if I said the puppy jumps up because he gets away from other puppies running around him, that tells me it's important for this puppy to be able to say, I need to leave, I want to get away. So by understanding that the behavior consequence, the contingency is negative reinforcement, the behavior of jumping up is maintained through the removal of other dogs running around my butt or sniffing my butt. That tells me I can give this dog ways of saying, okay, if you don't want to be around these dogs, let's help you get out of this situation. And then we can also teach this dog to be relaxed and happy around other dogs, sniffing his butt, and have a very positive reinforcing learning conditions, so that in the future the puppy has less of a reason to want to escape being around other dogs and puppies. So I think it gives us a lot of information by understanding what's going on from a behavior consequence perspective, and it's very ethical. I think there's another point, I can't remember now.
Aggression. Before you know it, you're working in a psychic world.
Oh yes, the idea of this working in the psychic world. And when he says this, it makes me laugh, because this was videoed however many years ago. And if you look at modern dog training today, or modern training, and I did this myself, I don't do it so often now because I talk about it slightly differently. But before I used to talk about, well, the frustration led to aggression, or the fear led to this. How do we even know that? How do we even know that the frustration led to the aggression? For me, there's two different things going on. The frustration, when we describe what we're seeing as frustration, well, we're seeing a number of behaviors and we're making an inference or interpretation that there's frustration going on. Now, for me, I don't need to understand if that doesn't help me design my behavior program. So if I've got a dog who's doing something, barking, or a parrot who's screaming, I don't have to go, well, is a parrot frustrated or is a parrot sad, in order to learn how to help this parrot. Because what I can do is go, okay, so what's happening? A parrot screaming. When does a parrot scream and what's the outcome? So potentially, if I'm cooking food and normally I walk up to a parrot and I go and give my parrot some of the food that I'm cooking. So I'm making some toast and I walk over and give my parrot some toast. Now, and the parrot's at the perch waiting for it, bobbing his head backwards and forwards. Now I start getting all this screaming behavior, because today I'm making the toast. The toast has come out of the toaster and I'm buttering the toast up and doing other stuff. And then a phone rings. So I'm busy talking on the phone. Potentially a behavior that's previously been paid off, parrot at the side of the cage bobbing head, equals human comes and gives me toast, is no longer getting toast. And so we're withholding a potential reinforcer that's previously been a behavior that's previously been reinforced is no longer getting reinforced. And that's an extinction procedure happening. And we know where there's extinction, you get operant variability. So you get behaviors vary slightly. So you might get, rather than just a head bopping sideways, you might get head bopping backwards and forwards. You might get the bird starting to hold on to the bit of the cage, or you might get the wings open, or you might start getting vocalizations and screaming. And why do you get these operant behaviors? Well, if you think of it from a natural selection, evolutionary perspective, when we talk about operant learning, if you talk about Skinner's way Skinner was sort of describing operant learning, Skinner didn't sit in a laboratory and invent anything. He didn't go in and go, I'm going to invent positive reinforcement. He gave it that label. However, what he was doing is describing natural phenomena, natural procedures that occur because we live on planet Earth. And so if you imagine there's a wild animal, some kind of bird, and they live out in the natural world, well, this was in the natural world, and the bird scratches and food appears. And then there's been no rain, it's very dry, the bird scratches and there's no food. And the ground doesn't break when the bird scratches. If the bird just gave up, they wouldn't survive. However, because of this natural phenomenon of extinction procedures, extinction occurring, when the bird scratches, nothing pays off. So previously reinforced behavior no longer accesses reinforcers. You get operant variability because of the design of nature and biology, and this is a natural learning process. And now because of the operant variability, you get, rather than just a scratching, the bird might scratch harder. You might get scratching at a faster rate. You might get scratching and pecking on the ground. You might get a bird jumping on the ground. Now, one of these behaviors accesses reinforcement. And so essentially we call this an extinction burst. So there's an extinction happening, then you get all these behaviors occurring, and often we try and avoid extinction bursts in training. So for example, if you've got a dog and they're jumping up, rather than just saying to a client, ignore your dog, we know the side effect of ignoring a behavior is you're going to get that extinction burst. So you might get a dog who starts to nip and grab hold of your clothing potentially. And so there are side effects to, I've just broken, my desk is a little bit broken. And so there are side effects to extinction bursts. And so that's what's going on. So if we describe what's going on from an observational perspective, and so I see this, I see that this occurs, so then we can measure and we can test. So we can go, okay, so what's happening to the outcome? We can manipulate the outcome and actually be able to measure and see something. And then based on that, you can draw a hypothesis, or you can test it and actually go, there's causation here. And we can go, based on that, I think the animal might be experiencing frustration based on that extinction, rather than just watching the behaviors and the animal screaming, going, he's just fearful, he's just frustrated. I think there's a better way of leading to that is by actually watching the environment and understanding the ABCs. And that allows us to make better inferences, potentially, if those inferences are important. And I think they might be important for certain reasons, but like I say, for me, I don't need to understand if the dog is frustrated to help them jump up in a different way, because my contingencies help me establish whether it's escape or avoidance or access to something, and I can give my animal different ways of doing that.
World of some kind in which there's no contact with reality whatsoever. And that, I think, is misleading. It diverts attention away from the kinds of things which will be much more usefully identified and changed.
Well, what do you do to change behavior if feelings aren't the key to changing behavior? What does change behavior?
What changes behavior is the environment, a change in the environment. If the environment stays the way it is now, then the bodily conditions will stay as they are, and the feelings of those conditions will remain unchanged. But if someone, for example,
I think, again, listen to, I think it's so important in terms of listening to the phrasing. And the more I read and listen, the phrasing starts meaning whole new things. And I hear things that I didn't hear previously. So even that little bit there, it's going to go back.
Then the bodily conditions will stay as they are.
So the bodily conditions will stay as they are.
And the feelings of those conditions will remain.
And the feelings of those conditions
remain unchanged.
Now, you can't, like, how do you access a feeling directly in a lot of the work we do? Or are you looking at bodily conditions and then looking at the kind of feelings that are going on? And then from a behavior perspective, what are we looking at? And again, when we talk about behaviorism from a Skinner's perspective, the difference here is, when we're looking at from a behavior analytic perspective, behavior is the thing you're interested in. In a lot of other psychology or other sciences, it's not necessarily, well, I don't know if it's like, other psychology, you're not necessarily interested in behavior because of what behavior means, and understanding behavior itself. So the growling, and then what factors influence that growling, and what's maintaining growling behavior and things like that. What some sciences are more interested in, or what some psychology is more interested in, is going, okay, what's the growling? Now growling, and then use growling to infer something else. In behavior analysis, not necessarily trying to, you're not inferring anything. So you're not going, because the dog is growling, it means this. What you're doing is you're looking at your antecedents, your behaviors, your consequences, and you're understanding that behavior, the growling, and the conditions under which it occurs, and you're able to change the conditions and change the growling, and animals' internal private behaviors, private events, feelings will change as well. And so I think that's such an important thing to note here, is the difference between different sciences and different perspectives in behavior analysis. Like I say, and that's an area that I'm really passionate about, and how I work when I'm working with my clients is we're looking at behavior within its own right. I'm not looking at a dog's behavior to infer other things. I'm looking at behavior, the consequences, antecedents, and how I can change those environments to change that behavior. Private behaviors, which I might infer, but I'm not looking at behavior to go, I'm reading the animal's mind, or this is going on inside the animal.
But if someone, for example, is feeling depressed, now this might be a physiological thing which could be changed with a drug or something of that kind, but it might very well also be due to a shortage of reinforcers. You don't do anything that pays off. Everything you try goes wrong. You try to go out the door and you bump against a jam, and you see some.
Now, really important here is Skinner's not saying, and then also what we're not saying is there's no kind of medical side or changes in biochemistry and things going on inside the body that's leading to the feeling of depression, anxiety, and things like that. So there's different things going on. It's different perspectives, different reasons, but he's saying there's that reason, but then also there's another possible reason here.
And say the wrong thing, and everything you do goes bad, and you then are in a state of inanition. You aren't doing anything. You're not interested in trying anything new, and you're sitting around wondering what's happened to yourself. Now, that can be corrected not by trying to change the feelings of depression, but get this chap to do something that is going to be reinforcing and build up the kinds of behavior which will give him the achievement which is then felt as a sense of achievement, which will offset the sense of discouragement or depression.
By environment, you're not confining yourself simply to the physical aspects of life, are you?
No, I'm thinking of the social environment, but I would make a distinction between those social environments which are specific.
I was just thinking when he said that little previous nugget there. So again, thinking about working with my learners. So I've got an animal who might be hiding underneath a chair, or an animal who might be doing something and nothing's paying off. So within that context of say a puppy class, for example, I haven't really thought about this. So before I did this video, I just kind of thought, oh, let me go and do this video. So I'm kind of having to think on my head. But anyway, so say you're in a puppy class, you got a puppy underneath the chair, and the puppy's hiding underneath the chair. So puppy's turning their head, going as far back underneath the chair, and potentially there's escape behavior going on. Maintained through negative reinforcement, escaping stimuli, moving away from other animals, people walking by is maintaining going underneath the chair. And so the reason I think it's so important to understand this perspective is you start looking at this and you go, okay, so with that dog, do I just throw treats and try and make friends? Or if I start to understand these ABCs and you start to look at, okay, so what's going on? If I start making throwing food contingent on head turn or sniffing, so I'm walking around teaching this puppy class, this puppy's underneath a chair. Now, I might actually question whether I want the puppy in that situation in the first place. Can I arrange my environment so the puppy doesn't have to be hiding under a chair? Can I give them more space, more barriers, etc., etc.? But just ignore that aspect of it for a moment. So we want to look at different antecedent arrangement in the first place. If you've got a puppy doing that, maybe coming into a hall differently. And so, but let's just imagine you've got a puppy underneath a chair, and I understand that we can do so many other things that we can change before we even get to that point, so we don't end up with that. But let's just say we've got that. Rather than just throwing a treat at the dog, which is essentially doesn't allow the dog to have any kind of empowerment. There's no essentially contingency available. So there's no this behavior equals this outcome. So it's kind of a guesswork. It's really unpredictable for the learner. Whereas if I see the dog's nose twitch, or I start seeing the dog's head turn in my direction as I'm walking up and down teaching this class, and I just gently toss a treat at that point, my hand movement could be kind of punishing because or aversive, and depending on those things slightly mean something different. But the if I toss a treat and the puppy has no control over my hand movement, it's going to be quite scary. Whereas if I so the puppy looks in my direction or sniffs, I toss a treat, suddenly the puppy has control over my hand. After a number of trials, there's some learning going on. If I turn my head and look in that direction, that hand moves and a treat comes out. Potentially the hand movement becomes less scary, and also it's become so predictive that now the puppy can control when a treat is being thrown towards him or her, as opposed to the puppy just having things randomly thrown at them. And I think there's such a big difference there on how we deliver that treat, when we provide that treat, one thing can provide more empowerment and more control, and one thing can take away control. And again, what's going to say in here is, so you've got someone and nothing's going right for them. You've got this puppy, nothing's going right. They're in this class. There's a lot of noise. There's a lot of dogs. They can't control another dog moving. They can't control the sound of the nails on the floor, the collar tag, someone dropping the puppy's lead. But we can start to give this puppy a point of control. If we start focusing on operant behavior, we start focusing on behavior consequence, suddenly this learner can be empowered. They can make choices. They can start to go, oh, I can do something that gives me control over my environment. And so that's such for me, that's such an important thing to look at. Thank you guys for your comments. There's a number of people saying they're enjoying it. So Emma's saying, brilliant, thank you for the information. Haley says, such a good point. I wish more people understood for humans, let alone animals. Nathan has a question or comment, and he says, what's your thought about anticipation and prediction on learners' behalf? I'm guessing it comes under A, but how important do you see them to affecting the B? So I think, again, for me, I look at it as potential cues, so discriminative stimuli, SDs, and also there's probably going to be motivating operations in play. And so I would probably put them under the A category and the MO aspect of things. And so motivating operations are sort of a stimuli that occur before a behavior, and they have two effects. They have a value altering effect, so they can alter the value of something as a consequence, and they also temporarily can increase or decrease rates of responding, so increase or decrease behavior temporarily. I say temporarily because we know consequences are what more permanently affect behavior. Now, if that sounds a bit confusing, you can obviously Google the term motivating operation and have a look. But most MOs came from trying to be more objective in describing so motivation, as opposed to just being a bit more fluffy. Probably fluffy is not the right word, but what I mean is, so for example, when you say the animal's hungry, like how can I say, well, when the animal's hungry, he does this. Now, what does hungry look like? How can we make a hungry more objective? So one way of doing that is we could say 4 hours since the dog, so 4 hours after the dog's eaten, we start seeing this influence on behavior, and we start seeing this influence on food as a reinforcer. So 4 hours since the dog's last eaten, food is more or less valuable, and we see certain behaviors happen more or less. Based on prior learning, if the animals learn, I walk over to mum, I sniff her, I put my paw on my lap, I walk over to the kitchen cupboard, I bark. If those behaviors previously paid off by getting food as an outcome, then under the motivating operation of being food deprived, so no food being fed for 6 hours, you're more likely to get behaviors that previously access food, because there's no point in a food deprived state doing behaviors that have never got you food before. So from a learning perspective, we can predict by looking at MOs that these behaviors are going to occur because they've been maintained through these outcomes, and also it's going to influence something, make more of that less valuable as a reinforcer, so food delivery. So how can this be used in real life? You might ask. So an example is I'm working with, say, a bird show. I'm consulting at a bird show, and they say, well, when it's sunny, this bird always flies off and sits on a tree and sunbathe. And so one of the things we could do is go, okay, so how can we make the sunbathing less valuable as a reinforcer, the behavior sitting on a tree and the sun being there, less valuable and less reinforcing, that behavior to occur less often? Well, we can manipulate the motivating operations. So say we're going to have this bird come out and ask the bird to do a little flight or a big flight. What we could do is, before the bird comes out in the show, you could, an hour before or 40 minutes before, offer them the opportunity to sit on a tree branch and soak up lots of sun. And so if you've been sitting in the sun for a while, then hopefully that starts becoming less valuable as a consequence. And so then when you ask the bird to come out in the show and do a little flight, potentially getting grapes is going to be more reinforcing now than sitting in the tree sunbathing, because you've been doing that. And also the grape being juicy and offering you some more hydration value is going to potentially be more valuable as a reinforcer in that situation. Let's look at a dog example. So a dog example for me would be, okay, so you say you've got a dog who's chasing squirrels. Now, I've had many cases where dogs are chasing squirrels, and you go out to a park, or you get to a park and the dog's barking and screaming. And I used to say to a client, okay, so we're going to take one step at a time, and when the dog looks at you, go forward. But first of all, you end up being there for ages. The dog ends up barking and screaming at the end of the lead. The client just looks at you like, this is nuts. Everyone's looking at me, feeling judged and whatever. And potentially there are not many people actually continue doing that or following through with that. So another way of looking at it, and for me, by looking at it from a motivating operations perspective, I started doing things slightly differently. Not for every dog and caregiver, but just say for this, for a particular one, I might go to a park, and as soon as we walk in, as we see a squirrel, I might actually say, let's look at that squirrel, go chase, and go running towards a tree. And then go, oh, where's the next squirrel? Let's go chase, running up to that tree. Where's the next squirrel? Go running up and chasing next to that tree. And might be running backwards and forwards around the park for maybe 20, 30 minutes. But what I've established there, first of all, is potentially I'm going to start making chasing squirrels less valuable as a reinforcer, or like just getting to squirrels. But also what I'm doing is, when you get to a park and you're saying, watch me, watch me, even if you're clicking and treating and you're going, well, I'm using positive reinforcement because when the dog looks, is it really positive reinforcement in that moment? Or has the contingency changed to be maintained for negative reinforcement? So the dog goes, okay, if the dog sits and eats the treat, they can get access to looking at the squirrel again, and they can escape the task demand placed on them of sit, watch me, hand touch. So just because you taught something for positive reinforcement doesn't mean positive reinforcement is happening all the time. So in that scenario, dog's trying to get to squirrels, you keep saying sit, dog sits and takes the treat. But what you find is the sitting behavior doesn't occur again very quickly for the next few minutes or 5-10 minutes. You're like, well, I gave him a treat and I reinforced. It wasn't very reinforcing. What was actually happening is, if the dog eats the treat and puts its butt on the floor, they can get to a squirrel very quickly. And it wasn't the most effective positive reinforcement. It's more likely to be negative reinforcement going on in that situation. And also what we're doing is teaching the dog sometimes to ignore what we're saying, like watch me and do this. So by going, where's the squirrel? Let's chase it. We start pairing and associating our words with chasing a squirrel, which is very reinforcing. So soon the dog starts to, when you say a word, the dog's looking at you, because that's a predictor of chase squirrel. And so now I've got a dog who's able to look at me when I say a word rather than just ignore me, because I've given my words meaning through functional things that function as reinforcers in that moment, as opposed to be artificial like a treat. And then also what I start getting is, as the dog looks at me, I can see if the dog will take a treat, as the dog turns around and offers that look. And then we can back that up with continuing running towards a squirrel. So we've already got a nice little loop going. We can just build and add to that loop. And then so with my clients, sometimes I'll be chasing, running around the park. You get to 30 minutes in and the dog just looks at you and goes, yeah, I do want a treat, please. And now I can ask for a sit or a hand touch or do something, pay that behavior, and then go, shall we chase a squirrel? And the dog's often like, okay, a little bit, but they're not as excited. But the next time you go to the park, what you get is a dog who looks at you a lot quicker. Before, last time it might have taken 30 minutes. Now they start looking at you within 10, 15 minutes, and the next time 5 minutes. But you're not having to stand there with a dog at the end of a leash, barking and screaming, an extinction procedure happening. And potentially that dog's probably feeling, if there's extinction happening, the dog's probably feeling very frustrated. And so you don't have all of those things happening by understanding it and looking at it from that motivating operation perspective. So if you're interested, Google motivating operations. We can talk about them a little bit more, maybe in a different video or something. But yeah, hopefully that made a little bit of sense. Lorena says, thank you for your clear explanation, expanding of these concepts, Chirag. Thank you very much. It's very reinforcing, or very nice of you to say, because I often feel like when I open my mouth, it's not very clear, or it's clear as mud. So I'm happy that you feel it's a little bit clear. I've seen you present this video at least 3 times, and it's incredibly important. But do you think you have bias based on your observing Skinner? Of course, definitely. When I look at things, there's biases because of what I learn, what I spend my time reading, and spending most of my time reading. I try and look at things from different perspectives, or look at different perspectives and read about them. But I don't. I decide or choose to spend my time focusing more on behavior analytic approach, and also wanting to learn more about the work of Skinner, because it's hugely reinforcing. It's reinforcing because I get that work seems to pay off. So I read something, then if I've got a client, it's useful. I find that I'm able to help my learners, my human and my dog learners, very quickly. So compared to reading other perspectives or studying other perspectives more, I find that looking at behavior analysis, but again, I spend more time doing it. So there's my biases. So yes, basically short answer is yes, there is a huge bias. Rob says, hi, Rob. Rob's just got a new puppy. Very cute and beautiful. Rob says, it's all operant. It definitely, that I would agree. It's all operant. It's operant all the time. Operant's there everywhere, all the time, every day, every moment, every minute, every time. Yes, 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 yes. Okay. Okay, so let's go back and see. So, yeah, Deb's. Hi, Deb. How are you? So Deb's like, is that what's called satiation? Again, just another way, if you look at, if you try to operationalize what is satiation for that individual, you could say eating 600 grams of food is satiation for that individual. And so we can look at what happens, and then how does that affect the behavior, and then you can call that satiation if you want, or you can start saying, okay, the animal's more hungry now, or a little bit hungry. But what does a little bit hungry and more hungry mean? We can start to add numbers to it by looking at like operationalizing it, and then it fits in terms of an MO, probably as an MO in your ABC analysis. Glad you're not raiding the kitchen cupboards tonight and getting some exercise chasing squirrels. Or talking about chasing squirrels, or just talking very fast. That was really interesting. I love the old science videos, and refreshing to see them paired with modern explanation and practices. Thank you, Haley. Lorraine, absolutely love this. Thank you for sharing your approach. Much appreciated. That is very kind of you. Hi, Zoe. How are you? Zoe's amazing. Hi, Zoe. Always learning something when you open your mouth, Chirag. It makes more sense than you think because you explain it beautifully. Thank you very much. Let's go back to Skinner on that note.
Specifically designed for instructional purposes or intentional control, how to get along with people, how to have enjoyable exchanges with people, and so on. This is just as important as how to tie your shoelaces, and that may need to be taught. and you may need to correct mistakes which are being made in dealing with that environment. I would take the social environment as part of the natural, the real world, outside the therapeutic situation, the counseling situation, or outside the educational.
When he says, talks about natural, that's the other thing I just want to mention is a lot of times when I'm teaching workshops and seminars, especially in certain countries, I found more so, but I get a lot of audience members going to me, you use a lot of this science stuff. Do you not believe in a natural approach? And it's really interesting because just sitting there and talking with them or understanding what the person's saying, because what their definition of natural is, because what I say to them, this for me, this is as natural as you can get, because like I say, Skinner's work is a description of natural phenomenon occurring, and I'm talking about Skinner's work, but also the work built on from Skinner's work and all the modern research and all the research that has built on it, not just saying what he said 60, 70 years ago, but building on that. If there's things that have changed, information that we've learned that's new or updated, but from a behavior analytic model, I think there's so much information available there, and I think these are things describing natural phenomenon on this planet and affecting behavior as we live. It's not something that anyone's invented. These are descriptions. And Susan Friedman says it beautifully in seminars where she used, I saw her first talk about this in the seminar, just the example of if the apple didn't drop, no one made the apple drop. And so no one, like just by studying the apple dropping in the laboratory, no one is creating gravity. It's a natural part of living on this planet. And so by labeling it as positive reinforcement, you haven't changed the natural phenomenon. It was a natural phenomenon's planet, but the word gravity attached to it, the label is man given, but no one invented it. And so that's the same thing, is as no one made the apple drop, by understanding in a laboratory or under certain conditions what makes the apple drop faster. When the apple drops, what makes the apple break? What makes the apple drop in different directions? What changes the speed that makes the apple drop? So if you drop it at different heights. And the same for behavior. When Skinner was studying behavior, many other people after him and before him, when they're studying behavior and they're going, okay, so this can make behavior happen faster, shorter latency, longer duration, shorter inter-response time, quicker rates. What they're doing is they're going, what factors are influencing the apple dropping, at what speed, what duration, where does it end up? And that's what we're talking about, behavior. And so by understanding these variable effects, and then it's not just Skinner's work wasn't just confined to a laboratory. He did a lot of work and looking at it in practice too. So with people in hospitals, psychiatric wards, with children, teaching in classrooms, looking at education. So, and he found that the results and things that he was learning about in his laboratories, you could see it happening in the natural world in many different conditions, and many other researchers and publications have found the same. So this is not stuff that we're just looking at in terms of in a box.
Situation.
How do you use the consequences of someone's behavior to help shape it and change it in a counseling situation?
Well, you do this when, for example, you suggest a change in job. You may come to the conclusion of what you've talked with this man about, that he's in the wrong job. That is, he hasn't got the talents for this. It isn't paying off. It's not reinforcing him. So you suggest, you may give him some tests or something, get a lead on this, and you suggest that he try a different line of work. Now, what you are doing there is proposing a change in the world in which he's living, which will, you hope, you predict, reinforce him more often than the world he's been living in. So you're proposing that he move into a world in which behaviors in his competence, in his range, will be reinforced. And you are predicting that the reinforcement is, the shortage of reinforcement is the trouble, and abundance of reinforcers will solve the problem.
You seem to really be arguing for the counselor's role as that of environmental engineer, in a sense,
yes,
helping the client change the circumstances under which he lives.
Yes.
And by that, by changing...
Helping, how did he phrase it?
Trouble and abundance of reinforcers will solve the problem.
You seem to really be arguing for the counselor's role as that of environmental engineer.
counselor's role as an environmental engineer. I think that's amazing, just saying it that way. Like, we're not going into, like, the animals. Dr. Susan Friedman says, let the animal control, the animal owns their own behavior, but we have access to the antecedents and the consequences. And again, this is essentially what's being said here in this interview, is we're not trying to manipulate the animal and make them behave. What you're doing is you're arranging environments and helping people arrange environments, and the behavior will change. So you're not trying to force behavior or like physically stop them doing something, but we're changing environments or helping people change their own environments.
In a sense,
Yes, I
helping
think
the client change the circumstances under which he lives.
Yes.
And by changing the circumstances under which he lives, the social and physical circumstances, you help him change his behavior.
Right. Well,
and again, when we say behavior, remember, behavior has two aspects. You get public behavior, so private behavior, public behavior and private behavior, public events, private events. So basically, public behaviors are behaviors you can see and measure and observe from the outside. Private behaviors, private events, are things that are internal. The individual engaging in them can say or can detect they're engaging them, but no one from the outside, essentially. So I can say, I'm thinking about ice cream. You can't see me thinking about ice cream. That's a private event. That's a private behavior. You can see me going, Chirag's eyes go to the left, or his pupils go to the left or the right, or Chirag puts his hand on his chin on his hand, and that might be what you call thinking. But what you observe is Chirag's eyes are changing, and position of his eyes, and how he's putting his hand on his chin. You don't see thinking. And what's really important here is, I don't know if you guys have heard the term radical behaviorism. That was the philosophy of the science, Skinner's philosophy of his science of behavior analysis. And radical behaviorism was called radical behaviorism, not because it was radical in terms of you only study what you can see, but it was radical because Skinner said we shouldn't be ignoring things that you can't see. But at the same time, you shouldn't just be making up stuff about it. So what you need to do is find a way to study it objectively. And so that's why Skinner's behaviorism was radical. It was radical because it wasn't ignoring thinking. It wasn't ignoring emotions. And actually, we'll watch a video one of these days together, if you guys are interested, on some of Skinner's early work trying to study emotion. So Skinner wasn't trying to ignore what's going on inside. He was actually trying to study it and trying to make it more objective. And so when people say this radical behaviorism was radical because it didn't believe it, but there was a black box, that's a load of rubbish. What is radical? Because it was at its time, Skinner said, no, you shouldn't just ignore what you can't measure. You don't just ignore it. And he said it in this video, people's feelings are very real for that individual. Not ignoring it, but we need to find an objective, useful way of using it and working with it within this model.
Almost every situation lends itself to this kind of thing. Suppose, for example, that a person comes to you, someone that he loves has died, and he's suffering from sorrow, grief. He goes home at night, and there is where his wife was or his child was. The child's toys are still around, and so on. And you say, well, look, get rid of that situation. That situation is what is evoking all of these responses, which are no longer feasible. There's no one there to talk to. There's no one there to call by name. There's no one there to embrace, and so on. So move to a different house or move to a different city. Get away from the setting which is causing trouble. That is environmental engineering. It's simply getting rid of what appears to be a troublesome environment and arranging instead one which does not have those undesirable effects.
You're saying that the counselor's contribution to the client is ultimately in helping him rearrange the contingencies of reinforcement in his life.
Oh,
and that the counselor's contribution to the client is ultimately in helping him rearrange the contingencies of reinforcement in his life.
I love that. I love that phrasing.
And that the counselor as environmental engineer is the essential change agent. On the other hand, aren't there intermediate problems in helping the client get into this different kind of environment, where the relationship with the counselor is very important,
Yes. Oh, well, the counselor, like the teacher, has got to arrange contingencies which will get the behaviors going which are going to be effective elsewhere. Merely to get a client to behave with a good personal relation, in a good personal relation with you as the counselor, that's not going to get him very far, because you are a prosthetic environment. This is an expression that a student of mine, Ogden Lindsley, uses. You are building a special world. It's a fairly easy world because you've got a person who is not yet able to deal with the rugged side of the environment, so you are making it easy temporarily. You don't want to prepare him simply for an easy world, but temporarily at least. He is to say things that would shock other people. He's not to shock you. If he gets angry, you don't get angry back, and so on. You're building a small social environment temporarily.
This is so relevant to what we do. We're basically working with our animals. We arrange prosthetic environments to help promote certain behaviors and arrange for things that are easier in certain situations. But you don't want it to just happen in your living room. You need it to happen outside when you're walking your dog past another dog, or you want certain behaviors to occur when you walk past a child, not just in your living room or in the kitchen. And so he's talking about working with people, but we're translating this to working with our human caregivers for their pets. But I think it's so relevant
to find out what is wrong and to build up behaviors which will then be more effective in environments elsewhere.
So the counselor initially does have to build in the relationship a short-term
Yes.
new environment.
Yes.
Does that help establish him then as a more powerful reinforcer and then moving to help the client change his behavior by rearranging contingencies?
Well, of course, one classical problem is that the counselor becomes too important to the client. His approval is terribly important, the transference problem in psychoanalysis and so on.
That you hear Teresa McKeon and tag teachers talk about how you give feedback, and often, like, one benefit of using tag teachers, you're not like there's not that judgment or that approval behavior. So where you're giving feedback and going good, your click essentially is taking that away, and so the learner isn't going, oh, I'm being judged, I didn't get it right, I did get it right, or I did it really well there. And then you become reliant on that person and that voice and that feedback, essentially. So it's really interesting here. And for me, when I'm working with a client, I'm always looking for ways to design how we work so that the client can come to me, and I've arranged the environment so they can come to me and say, well, did you think, what about if I do X, Y, and Z? And it's like, that's amazing. That's perfect. So rather than just always giving them the answers, you arrange the environment so that almost the answers are made more available, but essentially they're just at the end of their tongue for them. So because of the way you've asked questions, because of the way you've said certain things, the client is able to then go, what do you think about this? Like the client's invented that answer, or you just suddenly came to them. Nothing suddenly just comes to you. And I can see there's a question here from Claire talking about some creativity. And Claire, we'll come to this. There's another video that we can watch together where Skinner and his students look at cognition and creativity and things like that. And we can talk about this more when we talk about that. But how can we almost arrange the environment for the client to have those answers available? And that's what I want my clients to be empowered and come up with ideas that are going to be useful. But the way we kind of set the environment up for that verbal behavior can be really useful in consultations. And
how do you break that? How do you keep the client from coming back for this warm help that he's been getting, which can be misused, of course, by the therapist, who isn't necessarily averse to having clients come back. These are terribly difficult problems, and I haven't any single solution. Again, I have to look at every case and see what can be done in that particular case. But the whole counseling situation is designed because of problems which are presumably to be cleared up, and that is the main ultimate reinforcer that's going to keep the client coming and to give the counselor some sense of achievement.
One approach to psychotherapy assumes that the individual has within himself the capacity for growth. And what the counselor does is provide the relationship which allows the counselor, which frees the client to grow himself. Is that a valid assumption?
No, I think that's a very misleading assumption. I think that if to suppose that the
Go Skinner, go Skinner, go Skinner. Yes, Skinner, please, Skinner, say this. I just really say this is because this whole argument, or not argument, this discussion about like self-control and oh, don't get me started with that. But what I'm trying to say is, Chirag, use your words. What I'm trying to say is, so I used to think about I keep going off on tangents and stories. Sorry, people. Actually, I'm not sorry. But you can obviously choose to not watch this. But change your environment. There's a quote that says, "You're not a tree. If you don't like where you are, move." That just came to my head. But anyway, so what was I actually going to say? Oh, crap. Someone remind me what I was about to say. Oh my God, Chirag, you're bad.
The capacity for growth.
And yes, self-control. So I just had to arrange the correct environment for that thinking behavior to occur, you see. Rather than just going, I need to think harder, I can't think of it. What I needed to do is put myself into an environment where the thinking behavior of self-control appeared. So by just going back on the video and arranging the verbal repertoire of what they're being said as the antecedent, suddenly promoted my thinking behavior, and talking about self-control came back to me. I say came back to me, but the environment promoted that thinking behavior. See, Skinner, amazing. So self-control, impulse control. What I was saying there was a lot of times when we go, the animal has to learn self-control. That self-control is almost like the animal inside is learning this control, is controlling themselves. And that just, how does that even happen? If we understand operant learning and you understand how consequences and antecedents are affecting behavior, the individual can't self-control themselves, because what's happening is there's antecedents of stimuli and environments that are doing that. So when it comes to dogs, for example, and we can go into this another day, but when it comes to dogs, for example, the point I'm trying to make is, if I think of it as teaching self-control, what starts happening is you do things like, I remember what I used to do was, the dog gets to a door. If the dog leans forward or I open the door, the dog goes forward, I shut the door. That I open my car boot, the dog goes to jump out, I shut my car boot. And I'm teaching self-control. I put a treat down towards the dog's nose, the dog goes towards the treat, and I pull the treat away. Self-control. This construct and label self-control. Okay, I'm getting like, hopefully you can see the point. If you don't, I will explain it a bit more. But if you're a trainer who goes, I focus on using least intrusive methods, and rather than jumping to the most intrusive, if we look at, dog goes forward, I shut the door in the dog's face. Dog goes to jump out the car, I shut the boot. The dog goes to move towards a treat, I pull the treat away. None of that is positive reinforcement. So how can we say we're a trainer who focuses on, and you never use just positive reinforcement, let's be realistic, but in a training class, if you're teaching people, when I was teaching people to put the treat and then pull it away, let's be correct about this. A, B, C. Antecedent, behavior, consequence. What's the behavior? Dog moves forward. What happens to that? What happens next? Door slams in their face. What happens to that behavior of moving forward? Decreases. So if the behavior is decreasing, punishment is probably occurring. What happens? Was something added or removed? Well, the door slammed in your face, so you've positively punished moving forward behavior. Okay, let's look at the behavior of sitting back. So the dog moves forward, door slams in their face. So the behavior of sitting, when the door now opens, goes up. So we're talking about reinforcement is occurring. What happens when the dog sits? They escape. So the dog goes forward, something slams in their face, and so you're negatively reinforcing. You're removing a stimulus, the sitting behavior, and you're positively punishing going forward behavior. And so what about there's a treat coming down to your nose, and as the dog goes forward to take the treat, you pull the treat away. So potentially you're negatively, so the behavior of going forward is decreasing punishment. You're removing something, so you're negatively punishing the going forward behavior. Whereas can we teach a dog to sit and actually stay sitting while the door opens or the car door opens without it slamming in their face, and teach it with more positive reinforcement? Of course we can. Everyone can teach a dog, well, not everyone, but most people can teach a dog to do those things. And then let's put the cue of the door opening as stay in a sit position equals food is coming, or treats are coming, or you get to jump out the car, or something's going to happen. But rather than slamming that in their face, so often with the term self-control, or by talking about impulse control, I think we often use a lot of extinction and negative punishment and negative positive punishment in certain situations to actually train those behaviors. And then we're okay doing it because we're calling it self-control. And actually, when a lot of people talk about self-control, what they're actually talking about is they want the dog to respond to cues, to discriminative stimuli in the environment that are non-verbal or that are not on the person themselves. But that doesn't change them in any way. They're still cues. So you want the dog to see a squirrel and have self-control. Well, you don't want the dog to have, it's not self-control per se. What you're doing is teaching the dog that the squirrel running is a cue to look at you or to sit, because it accesses or it means something else. So a course that I did with Florida Institute of Technology, they taught thinking about cues or discriminative stimuli as having a surname. So it's not just a cue, it's not just an SD, it's SD for something. So it's a cue for positive reinforcement, a cue for positive punishment, a cue for negative reinforcement, or cue for positive reinforcement. And so when you think about a cue, think about the full meaning of it. It's a cue for, so the squirrel running across the road is a cue for positive reinforcement. If I look in this direction, I can access treats, so I can access running after the squirrel. And so if you've got a dog who goes to or sits, sees a squirrel running, and if they go forward, they get yanked, or that you go or you step in front of them, potentially the dog seeing a squirrel is a cue for negative, some kind of negative reinforcer or positive punisher, and depending on what behavior you're defining or what behavior you're looking at. And so we have to think of it from those perspectives. So often when people say, I want my dog to have self-control, what I often hear is they want stimuli that are non on the person or verbal from that person to be having some control over that behavior. But you teach that in any other way, like you would when changing any other cue. Establish behavior, make sure that behavior is occurring, then start to change the cue, the discriminative stimulus, and focus on stimulus control under those for that condition. But if you start the other way around and label it as self-control, what we often do is do bad training procedures, and we almost as like we're adding in cues before you've actually established behaviors. Hopefully that kind of gave a little bit of a blurb of what I was going on about. Julie Clayton. Hi, Julie. There's a very cute little doggy there. I hope there are some tips about getting out of a prosthetic environment to a real one. Sometimes the gap to bridge seems huge when working with a reactive dog. Brilliantly in what I will now call a prosthetic environment. That's very true. So how do we move from a prosthetic environment to a real one? And I think we'll see what Skinner, if he gives any tips based on the human counseling example. For me, when I'm working with a dog, say, I don't know, a dog who barks and lunges, it becomes about sort of when I'm working around cars, what am I doing? So just the example I'm thinking of is a dog who's lunging at cars as cars go by. So again, I want to look at, is that escape behavior? Is it behavior that accesses something? So is a dog learned that I bark and lunge at cars and my caregiver says, sit, watch me, here's a treat? Or is it that actually lunge when a car goes by, that the dog lunging, the car disappears, and that's what's maintaining the behavior? And then for me, it's interesting where you go, okay, so why, when the car disappears, is that reinforcing for a dog? What if I think it's a negative reinforcement contingency going? And so then I look at the wider environment. the wider environment could mean looking at antecedents, consequences, but so looking at antecedents and looking at MOs. And so also think about pain as an MO. So if you've got a dog who is in slight discomfort and a car going by, a loud noise, actually having that car disappear and the body relaxes, pain's going to have an influence on how valuable something is as a punisher or as a reinforcer. So I think this, for me, looking at things from ABCs and understanding, is it potential negative reinforcers or positive reinforcers, and then looking at why is that valuable as a reinforcer, can help me look at so many different things, and then go, okay, so I work with someone who is, if I have the knowledge of some of the medical model or the veterinary model, or I work with someone who has more expertise in that area, to rule certain things out or to look at those function of those stimuli. Yes, Nathan, I agree. We can be friends. We were friends before. We can be better friends. What is friend? How do we break down the label of friend? So yeah, so talking about self-control and impulse control. Okay. So Deborah's saying perhaps we could say dogs have no sense of self, so there can be no self-control. That potentially, does a dog have sense of self? I don't know. It's a good question. Some people would say yes, some people would say no. And even if the science isn't there to support something, doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It just means the science isn't there to support something. So often when we look at things from a scientific perspective, you're not being closed-minded. What you're doing is you're going, this is what we have evidence to support or dispute. And here we don't have any evidence for, but it doesn't mean it's not true. Let's see how we can pose it into a researchable question and try and research it. So I love that, Debs. Thanks. So did that blurb about self-control make sense to anyone watching? Is anyone still watching? And yeah, so that's, I'm thinking, when I think about self-control, I'm thinking about, I want my dog, he gets to the curb of a road, and that curb of the road is a cue for engaging in a certain response, equaling a certain outcome. Emma says, this is amazing. I thought my reactive dog barking in the car was just something I had to put up with. There are several types of hyperarousal stimuli. Start in the car, yay. We're going to the park, barking, reacting outside to people, barrier guarding. You have given me so much to think about. Emma, I love this comment, because when we label the dog as reactive, I hate that, like, just, if you heard me talk about tea time the other night, me and labels, but like when this is the issue, when we label this poor dog as reactive, you just encompass it all in this reactive label. But what Emma's beautifully done here is said the barking and lunging or whatever behavior the dog's showing, that we're labeling as reactive, can be maintained by so many different outcomes, and actually breaking them down, it may all be one functional class of behaviors. So functional class of behaviors would be or different topographies. So you get the dog who's barking, lunging, growling, jumping towards a car window. They all look different, but actually they're all functioning for the same outcome. But actually you could have dogs showing those different behaviors, but actually they all have a different reason, different maintaining contingency behind them. And so I think it's important to analyze these behaviors, because it can really give you more information. When people say, I don't know how to deal with this reactive behavior, I don't know how to deal with this frustration. Well, let's stop talking about the frustration or the reactive behavior, and let's break it down like Emma's looking at here, and look at, okay, this could be the car starting. There's something going on. Is it positive, negatively reinforced? There's people outside. Is that positive? And you could go from one to the other. So the dog lunging or screaming when the car starts could be escape behavior and maintained through escape, negative reinforcement. But then as you're driving, what the dog's learned to do, if I bark and lunge at people, when I bark and lunge when people are outside, I access people throwing food to keep me quiet or get me to do a sit, or they give me a cue like sit, which is being taught through positive reinforcement and maintained through positive reinforcement. So essentially you're giving a condition you're offering a condition reinforcer when you present that cue. And so sometimes when you start breaking down this reactive behavior, you suddenly start going, hold on a second, there's an element here of negatively reinforced behavior, positively reinforced behavior, and then you can start addressing these different areas as opposed to addressing the label. Thank you so much, Emma. I think that's amazing. Oh, Julie, it's little Beanie. I remember Beanie. Oh my God. Julie, hello, how are you? See that just when you put that word down, that has become a cue for so much positive reinforcement. Oh my God, this dog, oh guys, we'll have to, if Julie's happy, maybe we can show some videos of Beanie as a baby. She came to a workshop and she would have been described or labeled as a very nervous, reactive puppy, and just taking away those labels and focusing on arranging environments and the positive reinforcement. I think it was like 3 days, and we saw some amazing behaviors. Oh my God. Hi, Beanie. How are you? Love you loads. Hope we're still BFFs, even though I didn't recognize you in your picture. Please don't take offense. I love you, really. Okay, so Nathan says, yes, I've changed how I train Leave It after coming to your course, and the point of self-control being reactions to stimuli under specific conditions in general makes sense. I think as an approach, it is calming to a lot of guardians I'm working with, as they can see physical behavior instead of being unsure about abstract concept of how the dog feels. And I think that's so important, because when we're working, sometimes when we say the dog needs more self-control, it gives people a reason, I think, to blame their dogs. So when they go out and the dogs are still lunging, or their dogs are still trying to jump out the front door, or the dogs are still trying to jump out the car, people are like, well, it's a dog self-control. And it puts blame on the learner. And this could be a child. You could say the child needs more self-control, and you blame the child. But actually, rather than blaming the learner, we have to look at, as environmental engineers, what kind of contingencies are maintaining this behavior. And as us as part of the environment, it's our responsibility to be arranging this. So we take the responsibility away from the learner and place it in the hands of the teacher. And so I think it's so important that we look at it this way. And that's why the bucket game, when we're teaching the bucket game, the first part of teaching the bucket game is taught in this way. It's designed to stop doing the whole put it in front of the dog's nose and the dog goes forward, pull it away. We want the dog to actually just be relaxed and comfortable in that sit position around food, as opposed to going, food is in front of me, person has said leave, I have to turn my head and I have to do a lip lick, a yawn. How many dogs, when you say leave, do all of this business? And even take a little step back. When I say leave, I just want my dog to go, oh, cool, okay, I'm just going to look at your face. So often when we look at these behaviors, like self-control behaviors, remember what we often do is we stop using behavior science and we start doing some weird and wonderful stuff, weird and wacky and wonderful. I don't know if that's a good word to use or not. But like, for example, when you stay going, I'm going to teach impulse control leave, you go, I don't want the dog to go forward, or I don't want the dog to jump out the car. But that's teaching absence of behaviors. We're not working with dead animals. Absence of behaviors, only dead animals do absence of behaviors. Live animals do behaviors. So we don't want to teach a dog to stop touching food, or we don't want the dog to, what do we want the dog to do instead? So when I say leave, I would like my dog to close his muzzle and look towards my face. I can teach a dog to close muzzle and look towards my face using positive reinforcement, as you guys can, and you don't have to punish anything. And then you attach the food coming closer as a cue for mouth close, eyes up. Food comes, mouth close, eyes up. So you can actually focus on teaching what you want from a positive reinforcement contingency rather than negative reinforcement or punishment contingencies, because you're defining the behaviors what you want rather than what you don't want. And when we talk about a lot of these impulse control, frustration tolerancy, businessy things, and there's no evidence. I haven't seen very good evidence to show me that if you teach impulse control in this environment, it generalizes to this environment, and then the animal suddenly has more impulse control. And where do you find this impulse control inside the animal? Okay, I'm going to stop going on about impulse control now. Chirag, stop it. We're going to go to carry on with the video. Let me just see what you guys are saying as well. Thank you. I just want to take a moment, actually, to say thank you so much for joining me on this Sunday night. What time is it? Is it still Sunday? It's nearly still Sunday night in the UK. Thank you for joining me, because it's made watching this video again a lot of fun. And I love that you guys are engaging and sharing your thoughts and comments, and it's very reinforcing. We shall definitely do this again. Okay. Oh, hi, Jessica. How are you? Jessica is a very amazing person who works at the BC SPCA, and I've had the pleasure of meeting her and working alongside her when I visited the SPCA many times. So, hello. Zoe Carter says this is being reinvestigated currently. It looks like they do self, but through scent or visual. Looks like they do. But through scent or visual. Ah, okay. Oh, that was in relation to recognition of self, I think. Hi, Alison. Alison says, hi, Chirag. What are your thoughts on dogs finding barking reinforcing, i.e. just barking, or is it always communicating something else? That's a really interesting question, Alison. So I don't look at the dog engaging in the behaviors reinforcing the behavior, if that makes sense. I think there's, the way I'm looking at it is the barking, the dog barks, and people say, well, it's just self-reinforcing. I'm questioning that in terms of, okay, so first of all, why I'm questioning that is often when the dog is barking, what functional outcome occurs? So what change? And you might say, well, there's nothing changing. Look, the room is completely still. However, there may be a schedule of reinforcement occurring here. So there could be the dog has been shaped, that there's no feedback occurs, has to be immediate, but it could be I bark it for 2 hours and then there's feedback. But that was shaped in the process. And so I think there's a more logical and more feasible explanation looking at schedules of reinforcement here, as opposed to that the barking is somehow reinforcing the barking. There has to be, because the way I'm looking at it is the environment has to play some kind of role in reinforcing or establishing or maintaining that behavior. So for me, I'm interested in what's going on, and sometimes you might have to look at, rather than just that immediate little picture there, you have to expand out to see what's going on. And in real life, we're not just looking at this one small ABC here, because there's so many things going on. You're having to go back and back and back as much as you need to. And so just remembering that, I think that can provide some explanation. So that's one part of it. And then the other part is, if the animal engages in a certain response, a change in the environment might not be to the physical external environment, but there could be some changes to the internal environment. So when the animal engages in a certain response, pain stops, or there's some kind of change internally, and you may not be able to see that from the outside. And so, but there is a maintaining outcome. I don't think that behavior is maintaining itself, but there's some change in the environment, and the environment isn't just the environment is a change in the change of something internal or external. So for me, I'm looking at both of those, and often, like I say, most of the time you can see external changes, but when you can't, that's when you start, for me, questioning from a medical model or a veterinary model, and looking at it and asking help from people who can maybe access some of this through blood tests, through scans, through x-rays, through other things, or sometimes indirectly through pain trials and lots of other things. You might look at diet changes and suddenly see a behavior because there's change in less gut pain. And so I think there's always an environment that's influencing the behavior. Sometimes you don't see that directly, but remember, the great thing about the science of behavior change and radical behaviorism is you don't just ignore what you can't see. You look for ways of experimenting and ways for gathering data in an objective, empirical way. Empiricism is an important philosophy for a behavior scientist. Okay, so let's carry on with the video. There's a couple of other questions, and I'll come to those questions maybe in a little while.
And what the counselor does is provide the relationship which allows the counselor, which frees the client to grow himself. Is that a valid assumption?
No, I think that's a very misleading assumption. I think that if to suppose that the individual is going to find his own solution, as far as I'm concerned, simply allowing some other controlling system to take over. If the counselor is not willing to accept his share of the responsibility in arranging a new environment and leaves it up to what he calls the individual, he's leaving up to other environments, not to the individual, but to other environments.
Where does the
genius
differ slightly easily, that they are
knowledge about positive and negative reinforcement
person comes to him and he builds and forms of knowledge.
Sorry, guys, I kind of just messed up where the video was meant to be at. But he just said it in a genius way. This is Skinner's genius. Did you guys just hear what he said? If you heard it, write it in the chat box what he just said. I'll try and find the right time.
If the counselor accepts as referrals those children who...
And I think you can demonstrate quite their work done, our design of cultures, whether the role...
which the teacher regards as disruptive. The environment needs to be changed.
He can turn to the client himself and say, culture which is set down in so many words what it regards as true and good.
That are implemented in a both. And what the counselor does is provide the relationship which allows the counselor, which frees the client to grow himself. Is that a valid assumption?
No, I think that's a very misleading assumption. I think that if to suppose that the...
I've just realized they're not even about halfway through the video now, and we're going an hour 29 minutes. I'm gonna watch the whole video, but so hopefully if you guys can stay, amazing. If you can't, I will put a copy of this video on my Facebook page. So if you need to watch it another day in a little bit of, like, if you don't stay awake until 5 a.m. in the morning like me, then you might want to get some sleep if you have to do other stuff tomorrow. So I understand, but we'll carry on.
Individual is going to find his own solution, as far as I'm concerned, simply allowing some other controlling system to take over. If the counselor is not willing to accept his share of the responsibility in arranging a new environment and leaves it up to what he calls the individual, he's leaving up to other environments, not to the...
He's leaving it up to other environments, not the individual. Genius. Yes, yes, yes. Self-control. Yes, yes, yes. Yes, that's what we need to start thinking about. Thank you so much for joining me, Lorena, and joining everyone. Have a good night. Exactly. Zoe Carter says misleading allows other controls to take over. It's not the self controlling. And when we put it into self, we just put blame onto the learner because they're not getting it right. They don't have enough impulse control.
Individual, but to other environments.
Where does the responsibility lie for choosing the values that are implemented that are the consequences of a counseling relationship? One of the frequent criticisms of the behavioral method is that somehow it will imbue the counselor with power to impose a set of values on people. How can it be set up so that doesn't happen?
Well, the whole question of the values in a culture lies well beyond any field of, say, education or economics or counseling or government. They are very difficult questions because they're concerned with the future, which is not clearly predictable. And I don't believe a counselor has any private way of arriving at a good set of values. He can either take himself to be a representative of a culture which is set down in so many words what it regards as true and good, or he can pretend or claim, and perhaps even argue that and justify his own special set of values, which may differ slightly with those of the surrounding culture and seem to him better. He can turn to the client himself and say, what do you want to do? And are you sure you want to do that? All right, let's see then if we can't reach that final stage in this particular episode.
So the counselors can say to the client, in essence, my technology to help you change your behavior is a neutral one. You specify the kinds of changes as client that you want to make. My specialty is in helping you do that because I understand how the environment needs to be changed to accomplish certain sorts of new behaviors.
Yes, like rather than just saying, this is it, let's work with you to understand based on what your cultural understanding and learning and what culturally reinforced behaviors and thinking behaviors there are. Let's work with you, as opposed to like we can use the principles and the technology, as opposed to going that's wrong, that's right. And we're so like we always judge each other and we're like that's wrong, that's right, that person's wrong, they say you shouldn't focus on emotions or you should focus on emotions. It's not. And I think the different perspectives, you're learning from different perspectives, different sciences, different information, bringing it all together ultimately is going to be the best for our learners. But I think I choose to focus my efforts on looking at it from a behavior analytic eye, and learning more about this, but also staying open to the fact that there's other ways to explore this, other frames to look at this from that might be helpful as well, and bring in those people. I can't be an expert on everything. I think we can either decide to learn little bits of everything, or have an area where we focus more on, but be aware of all the other areas and bringing them together. And I just personally am passionate about selling the story of why behavior analysis and operant conditioning is so important, and not to disregard any other science or to disregard the focus on anything else. But I just, like I say, from my perspective, I think that we're doing a disservice to so many animals, where a lot of times people disregard or actually go, oh, that operant stuff is out of date, or that operant stuff is not important, and not actually understanding what this operant stuff is, because it's so deep. People do PhDs and postdoc research, just like you do in other sciences and other studies, and there's so much deeper. What we do often as dog trainers, we're taught operant quadrants and this quadrant idea and operant learning. We go, well, I understand positive reinforcement, or I understand this. And I used to think that, and then suddenly I was like, got bitch slapped by picking up a book and reading a book and going, oh my God, when I started reading journals, or when I started reading things like, I don't know, behavior perspectives, here we go, perspectives of behavior science, and by the association, Behavior Analytic Association, here we go, oh my God, where's my camera, there we go. And so it's like going, oh wow, there's another way to look at this. Or I pick up another book, or I read another paper, or I go to somewhere else and go, wow, what I thought was operant conditioning, or I understood extinction, or I understand SDs, oh, we've just scratched the surface. There's so much underneath this. And so now when I look at these things, I go, whoa, one sec, I need to learn more. And there's so much more. So when we say, well, I understand the quadrant, or I understand this, or I understand that, first of all, the quadrant isn't a thing. But second of all, just like the idea that I understand positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, extinction, SDs, cues, motivating operations, discriminative stimuli, classical conditioning, just these things go so deep. So I would say this field is huge. And like, let's not just go, well, I understand, I gave there's so much more to understand from my perspective. And I think when I start understanding more and learning more, suddenly I find new ways of helping my learners, and helping them in a way that's efficient, that brings along significant social change, significant change for their lives now, as opposed to having a dog who lives a reactive life for the rest of their life, or a dog who is just a fearful dog, or he's just a fearful parrot, or just a dolphin that will never, he's just a dominant dolphin. Actually, by bringing behavior science to the table, I have a huge, a massive, amazing science and amazing technology that we can make a change to this animal's life significantly, and the animals around that animal, so the humans and the other animals living. So for me, that's why I'm so passionate about understanding more about behavior science and really pushing it out there, because I think we can bring changes to animals' lives. And I see so many animals that come to me, that have seen trainers or behaviorists, or just being labeled as reactive or he has separation anxiety, like it's inside of him, and that the client then believes, or the trainer then believes, this dog is going to live a life where they always have separation anxiety. And actually, from my experience working with many different species, I'm not seeing that pattern. What I'm seeing is, if we start to change contingencies and we start to change environments, internal and external environments, you can see a massive change. And I think it's huge. That's going to change the way the animal feels, the animal's emotional state, have internal changes that are reflected based on the external changes. I think there's so much of it, like this massive feedback loop. Anyway, I keep going off on different tangents.
What about, however, in a school situation where the counselor receives a client sent to him by the teacher, say, to change his behavior in the classroom, which the teacher regards as disruptive, or a young person on drugs is referred by the school to change his behavior, what are the value questions then? What's the counselor's position vis-a-vis that?
Well, obviously it can't be solved then by asking the client what he wants to be, or how he wants to be, or what his problem is. It throws us right back on the culture as a whole, where I think the question always comes back in any case. This is where the design of culture is, where the role of someone who is looking to the future of the culture and to the behaviors that are going to be important for that culture comes in. I don't have any simple answer to it at all. That if you believe that children who are running around in a disrupted classroom are somehow or other developing special kinds of freedom which are going to make them more effective and creative when they get older, then I think it's up to you to prove that. If, on the other hand, you believe that children who sit quietly when they're told to and get their work done are likely to develop useful skills, useful to themselves, to others, and to the culture, you have to prove that also. And
I really liked another thing when I watch Skinner's interviews or watch Skinner teach or give lectures. He says, "I don't know," or he says, we don't have the data for that," or he says, "We need to find data for it," or "If we're going to say this, let's find evidence for this or disprove something." So like not just saying, "Well, this is the case," but actually going, "We don't have data for this." And again, we might be watching this now a number of years later, and we have different data, we have different information available to us. But in them watching from when, like, obviously he doesn't know that, and so just watching what he's saying, I think is so important. Like, having the ability with a client sometimes to say, "I actually don't know, but we can try and find out."
My impression is that it has not yet been established that the kinds of freedom which are seen in the free school are developing creativity or originality in children, and I think you can demonstrate quite easily that they are using up time and energy that could go into the development of other skills and forms of knowledge.
If the counselor accepts as referrals those children who are seen as disruptive or discordant, isn't he really using his techniques to mold the child to the dominant values of the school?
He certainly is, and the people who subscribe to those values are hiring him to do that. It's very much like, let us say, a doctor who is concerned only with certain special forms of illness, and a person comes to him and he cures him so far as his specialty is concerned, but makes no particular effort to talk about the general health of this patient.
Is one answer to this dilemma to be found in the counselor as an environmental engineer, using his knowledge about positive and negative reinforcement to change the environment of the school, to help shape it from an aversive situation, which is clearly what the counselor got boxed into in the previous situation, to one where, say, freedom for the client is to be found in choosing amongst positive alternatives?
Well, let's start the other way, if you don't mind. Let's just take the survival of a way of life as a particular kind of value. It's the value according to which that way of life is going to be judged, whether we like it or not. How can you plan with respect to that? In the first place, you've got to predict what this culture is going to have to survive.
It's also really interesting hearing him talk about, like, the cultural values and this culture or that culture, as opposed to this is right for all humans, and because different things are considered right or wrong, different cultures, different upbringings, and sometimes we talk about it as, well, I'd never do that, that's just completely wrong. And actually open-minded, and rather than separating ourselves, just upbringing of different cultures, and for whatever reasons those behaviors are being shaped within that culture, doesn't mean it's applicable to every single human being. And actually, let's look at different cultures and different groups, and what's right or wrong doesn't mean that someone else is wrong because they're cultural learning, their behaviors are different, or what they consider is right or wrong.
Kinds of catastrophes it's going to meet of physical nature, what kinds of social problems are going to arise, and so on. And that's very difficult. It would be wonderful if we had a better value, but we haven't. So we make some kind of prediction that we're going to need to produce the goods we consume, we're going to need to stop polluting the environment excessively, we're going to need to stop breeding indiscriminately, we're going to want the individual to develop all his capacities to the fullest so that he will be available to the culture to deal with problems as they arise and so on. So we've stepped down one level now to the kinds of behavior.
Listening to Skinner, I also really I'm inspired by not just this lecture, but many other things I've heard where he talks about how we're seeing problems of how people are behaving, how behavior is being shaped and reinforced that are going to lead to problems for the world, the environment, and a lot of the things that we talk about as sort of problems that we face now as society on a global level. He talks about, he's talking about needing behavior change, and that he was really passionate. He wasn't an animal trainer. He wasn't trying to create animal trainers. He was passionate that actually if we understood behavior in the way understood behavior, then we could use it to have less wars, to help people get on, to help people help each other, to help live on a planet and have a healthy planet type situation, and not using the exact words he's using, but if you listen to his interviews, he was really passionate about the use of positive reinforcement and changing behavior, and actually not focusing on punishment, but focusing on positive reinforcement and growing individuals to help in that culture and that society and really help the planet and that we're living on, looking after the planet for the future generations. And that's why he was passionate about the science of behavior, is to be able to understand it, to reduce wars, and to help promote behavior positively.
That we want to set up. We want people to be productive, but we don't want them to be productive in a slave system that makes them emotional cripples and so on. We want people to enjoy themselves, but not simply by smoking marijuana all their lives and that kind of thing. We're taking into account the contribution that they can make to the future. Now, the next question is, under what conditions will people be like that? Under what conditions will they work productively, enjoy what they're doing without crippling byproducts and so on? Under what conditions will they develop themselves, their talents, their skills, their artistic, musical ability, and that kind of thing? So that is where that's where the behavioral engineer comes in. And if you then deal with a particular individual, you have to ask, how much do I know about this man? How is he, or child, how is he satisfying these regular standards that we have set up? Is he going to be a productive person? Is he going to be able to get a job and hold it without suffering, without being aversively controlled, without tiring himself out so that he doesn't enjoy the rest of his life and so on? I think by working back from the survival of a way of life, you can arrive at standards which are value judgments, and they may very well conflict with those which now prevail in the culture. I think the objection young people have to what they refer to as the Protestant work ethic is that under incentive conditions in America today, people work too hard. They spend too much of their time. They get too tied up. They work too long, and they're not able to live interesting and productive lives outside their jobs. And if that's the case,
sadly, I think that's true now. How many people are slaves to work, and how much of life is actually enjoyed? Never know what's going to happen tomorrow. We need to live in the now.
it is a perfectly legitimate complaint. This doesn't mean we should all just quit our jobs and walk off and do nothing. But then that's no solution to the excessive effect of contingencies, of economic contingencies.
Don't quit your job just yet.
Aren't you saying that the counselor can really help the client to be more free by learning?
I feel like I'm an interpreter, interpreting Skinner's work very badly, but interpreting it in my way.
to arrange things so that he can respond to positive reinforcers rather than reacting, as he so often does, say, within an educational setting, to aversive or punitive kinds of controls?
Well, I would agree, except when you say be more free, what I think you mean is he would feel freer. Because when you are under aversive control, when you are doing what you have to do, you do not feel free. When you're doing what you want to do, you feel free. But you want to do those things you are positively reinforced for doing. So that in a world in which positive reinforcement...
Even just that last minute, oh my God, we could be here for another 2 hours just going through that last like 2 sentences and just breaking those down. But I'm aware that we're at 1 hour 49 and just past midnight. Yeah, I don't know if anyone else heard that and went, oh, there's so much information already there, if it's just me. But let me go back a couple of seconds.
When you are doing what you have to do, you do not feel free. When you're doing what you want to do, you feel free. But you want to do those things you are positively reinforced for doing. So that in a world in which positive reinforcement replaced aversive control, we would all feel free. We would be doing the things we do with a great sense of freedom. And that's, I want that. I've spent my whole professional life exploring ways of getting away from aversive control and making the very best use of whole professional life with a great sense of freedom. And that's, I want that. I feel free. But you want to do those things you are positively reinforced for doing. So that in a world in which positive reinforcement replaced aversive control, we would all feel free.
Well, okay, one sec. I'm getting excited. I might pee myself. I just need to breathe. We should all breathe. Everyone, take a nice deep breath. Put your hands on your belly, and you want to feel your belly change. This time, let's hold the breath to a few seconds. Let's say 4. Okay, not going to pee myself anymore. Let's come back to this. Nicole, very good point. It's just me being silly. Doesn't really matter if it's midnight or not, because who cares? It's just, I'm not letting time control me. Look, I'm going to take my watch off and throw it away. Don't let time control you. Good, Nicole. Good point. Don't let time drive you. We can be here all night if we want to be, and all day, night and day. Why do we discriminate? Let's be fair to night as well as we're fair to day. I do have to just lower my voice slightly because my parents are trying to sleep in the next room because I'm staying at the house temporarily. So if I do start talking a little bit like lower, there's a reason for that. I could go downstairs, but I might disrupt my Wi-Fi as I do that. Okay. I love you guys. I genuinely love you guys. You guys are amazing. Oh, there's my little friend again, my new BFF. Hi, Yesham. Helen says, will you make this live available to post and listen to? Of course I will. Yes, 100%. This live is very nerdy. I love it. Hope this stays here to watch again. Of course, Monica, let's watch it again and we can talk about it, because I might listen to it and go, why did I even say that? Or actually, yeah, I actually made more sense than I think I said. But yeah, like definitely. Aw, you guys are great. Kat says, it's so useful to hear your understanding of Skinner's theory of behaviorism in later work of animals and dogs. What a treat. Thank you. Thank you. And great. Like, again, we should listen to this next year and we might hear things differently based on our learning that we've had over the last year. So definitely worth coming back and listening to these things. Okay, let me just go back to what I was going to pee at. So thank you, Nicole. No watch anymore. I'm free of time. My friends will hate you because they'll be like, he's always going to carry on being late now. It's okay. We're free. We're free beings.
We would be doing the things we do with a great sense of freedom, and that's I want that.
I like just okay. So Skinner wants us to have the feeling of freedom. One would interpret, therefore, Skinner wasn't anti-feelings. Feelings were not important. We want the individual to feel free. And he doesn't want it to be people to be driven through a punishment. Like, this is not out-of-date stuff. This stuff is relevant today, now, tomorrow, every single day when we're working with people and with animals. Let's use this information rather than calling it out of date and not understanding it properly. Yes, thank you, Skinner.
I've spent my whole professional life exploring ways of getting away from aversive control and making the very
come on, like I spent my whole professional life, like I'm gonna just quote what he just said accurately.
Exploring ways of getting away from aversive control.
Exploring ways of getting away from aversive control. So please don't say that, well, in the laboratory, Skinner said that you need to punish behavior to get it to reduce. No. If we understand what we're saying here, is there's ways to drive behavior. I'm not saying everything is positive and glitters and sparkles, but what I'm saying is there's many ways that we don't have to go to punishment to do things. And with people, he's talking about people behavior and animal. Like, just well, actually, no, Chirag, let me correct myself. He's talking about behavior. Skinner learned through his research the principles of behavior applied, whether you're talking about a human or a dog or a cat or a monkey. So we're talking about principles of behavior here.
And making the very best use of positive reinforcers. The whole field of operant behavior is a field of freedom in that sense. It's a field.
Okay, we have to write this down. Like, sorry, these are just like so many Twitter moments or like Instagrammable quotes and stuff that we're just like, oh my God, this would give me a year's worth of Instagram feeds and Facebook feeds of like quotes. Just one moment, people, please. One moment.
The very best use of positive reinforcers. The whole field of operant behavior is
my pen's not working. One moment. We don't need a pen. We use our phone to write this down. The whole field of
exploring ways of getting away from aversive control and making the very best use of positive reinforcers. The whole field of operant behavior is
the whole field of operant behavior.
Of freedom in that sense. It's a field of enforcers. The whole field of operant behavior is a field of freedom in that sense. It's a field of positive.
It's a field of freedom. Guys, if you're listening, I think we should all take a moment to like somewhere, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, anywhere you like, actually just write this out. The whole field of operant behavior is the field of freedom. The George Michael song "Freedom" just appeared. Like, came to me. Not just came to me. Load of rubbish. The writing the sentence out and hearing the word "freedom" elicited the thinking behavior of George Michael's song "Freedom." B.F. Skinner. Okay, here we go. So there we go. We're going to add that in. we're going to go add banner. There we go. There we go, guys.
Reinforcement, of course, the operant behavior also covers escape and avoidance and aversive control. But the positive side, the positive reinforcers in an operant situation are the very things which make people feel free. And I want more than that, more of that than we now have. I think it's a shame that we've gone on.
Oh my God. Oh, yes. Guys, I think I should go downstairs so people can sleep upstairs. Bear with me. Don't go anywhere. I'll be back. Stay there. 1 second. You don't have to stay there. I'm not telling you what to do, I promise. I'm not telling you what to do. Oh God, it's going to take, I have to do, okay, what am I doing? I'm going to do, we have a lot of equipment we have to carry. Okay, let's go downstairs. Shh, not too much noise. Okay, I'm back. So we can make a bit more noise down here without having to be working on an escape avoidance contingency. And so, yes. So now we can be accessing more positive reinforcers and feel free. We've just freed ourselves. Thank you, Skinner. And got some water, so. Okay, can you guys hear me? Am I all set up? Could you just post a yes in the comment if you can hear what I'm saying? Perfect. Thank you very much, Emma. Thank you. Okay, let's carry on. You guys are amazing. Okay.
I want more than that, more of that than we now have. I think it's a shame that we've gone on very things which make people feel free. And I want more than that, more of that than we now have. I think it's a shame that we've gone on so long resorting to punitive and aversive techniques.
I think we have gone on way too long using punitive and aversive techniques. And this was how many years ago, peoples? Come on, so many years ago. And we can't, like, come on. Yeah, like, come on. Just come on. Look. Come on. Thank you, Skinner. Everyone, let's say thank you, Skinner.
What contributions do you see counselors being able to make to the establishment of a system which really does operate on positive reinforcers?
Well, I think you have to have a very special technical skill to see the opportunity of arranging a way of life which will be primarily positive rather than negative. I think that's what you want, or what you do when you, well, for example, you suggest that this person take up a hobby. This won't work unless he gets something out of the hobby, or take up some form of art, or some type of game. If you think he can play a particular game well, they tell him to specialize in that. You are asking him to do the kinds of things which you predict he will be reinforced for doing in positive ways.
That's interesting. Well, not interesting, just a good reminder is what it's interesting as well is you predict it will be reinforcing. So we don't know if the stimulus functions as a reinforcer until you collect the data. So does the behavior change? So does that stimulus increase, strengthen, maintain that behavior? So does it? So we can say it's a reinforcer. Up until then, it's a prediction. It's a prediction that your piece of hot dog, you saying good dog, is a reinforcer. And I might as well say at this point, just in case, like if people are watching, like what's a reinforcer reward type thing? I say to clients, if I was to say, no, I want to use ice cream to reinforce my house, well, tough poo-poos, what you want to use. Tough poo-poos to me, if I can try reinforcing my house with ice cream, but it's not going to stay up very long. So definition of reinforcer is something that strengthens. And so if my house isn't strengthened by putting ice cream underneath it, then it's not a reinforcer. So if for your hot dog, you saying good boy is the ice cream and it doesn't work, it doesn't matter what you want. What matters is what the behavior is strengthened by. And so we have to look at that and just, if that's useful to you guys. So let's have a look at these lovely comments coming in. We do. Antonia says, we need a transcript for this section. Oh yes, a transcript would be amazing. Anyone got some time to write a transcript, please do so. And thank you so much to the B.F. Skinner Foundation for posting these videos on your YouTube channel for everyone to learn and look at. And I hope you're okay with me watching it live with everyone and talking about it. But thank you so much for posting this material. You guys are amazing. Paradox feel free, but doing the things we positively reinforce more. Is that freedom or unavoidable as there's always behavior and consequences? Alison, yes, exactly. So I think this is so really interesting is Skinner's got a book called Beyond Freedom and Dignity. And again, there's an audio version of it. And so I know Joe, Rosie and Nando Brown are like going for different podcasts and things like that and listening to them, and that kind of reminded me. So I listened to one of their their episode 1. They listened to something that Hannah Brannigan, Teresa McKeon, Eva Bertelsen and myself recorded, and they were talking about it. And that kind of I've been thinking about, I watch sometimes on YouTube Vocal Coach Reacts, and so I wanted to do some of those Vocal Coach React type videos. And then watching Nando and those guys, they're fantastic. If you haven't seen it, you should go check it out. Watching their session there, I can't remember what they called it, maybe picnic or something, made me think I need to get on and actually just do it. So yeah, thank you for that motivation, guys. And so we can definitely watch some of these other videos as well and talk about them. So yes, Alison, pretty much what you're saying here is, I think, well, when you look at freedom, like you want to feel free, like you have the feeling of I feel free, I don't feel free. And Skinner's saying like the feel free is different to what the contingencies available, and they're promoting certain feelings, or certain feelings occur like when there's certain contingencies potentially. And so we can achieve like both. And yeah, you can question, is that really freedom? But we live on a planet where consequences are there everywhere. And so there's no real escaping those consequences. And so that's always going to be a fact of life. And that's the way I look at life. And I look at, like Rob earlier said, it's all operant. I look at life as like anywhere, anything. I'm having a conversation with my friends. everything I'm analyzing through this lens, because that's the way I look at life and look at things. And someone else asks, is that a bias? Yeah, that's my bias. But I find it's the thing that provides me with lots of good questions and lots of good answers and lots of good discussions. Zoe, we love you too. Zoe Rescue. I think, Zoe, do you run the rescue? Or is that another Zoe I'm thinking about? Helen says, going nowhere, pop to the bathroom on the way if you like. Thank you so much. Very kind. You're allowing me to feel free. Zoe says, I'm cracking up. Awesome way to spend Monday morning. It is just a beautiful way. I'm so privileged to be able to spend Monday morning with you guys watching BF Skinner. And I couldn't think of a more beautiful way to spend Monday. Well, with my dog and my pets as well. They're sleeping, so I'm not going to disturb them right now. But it's a beautiful way to spend a Monday morning. Julie says, yes, Alison's question. My older dog loves nothing better than nicking footballs off kids. I try to make it so he nicks footballs off me, but really he loves nicking them off kids. He's not free to nick footballs off kids. I want to make him feel free. You prefer to do that, or prefer something else. It's also a lost cause now. He's 8. And I just make sure I have £20 to pay for the footballs. That works. It's always a solution. You just have to look at it from different angles, and carrying £20 notes with you, if that works and your dog gets to feel free, Julie, power to you, power to your dog. Oh, I always love seeing names. Nicole. I spent a few seminars Nicole and I have spent together. You brought your dog to one of them, your Aussie, and we got to work with your beautiful Aussie, and you're such a wonderful person. You've invited me to teach seminars for you, and we haven't managed to arrange that yet. But I would love to. Yes. Perfect. Zoe says yes. Good. Okay, let's see where we're going now. Oh, thank you, Marie. Marie agrees. Lisa Miller says, thank you, Skinner. Thank you, Skinner. Joshua James says, audio version of Beyond Freedom and Dignity. Yes, Joshua, we should definitely do audio version of Beyond Freedom and Dignity. And yes, Joan, Rosie, and Nando Brown, and I can't remember. Oh, it's so bad. But the amazing person who I'm so sorry that your name has gone blank in my head. I feel so bad saying that. It's not anything to do with you, it's me. And we've had a very amazing night, getting drunk and dancing, and if that, you can call it that, and having a lot of fun. But I'm getting old. I'm just going to move on. Oh God, now I can't. Okay, one sec. Score of K9 science. Guys, who's the other person? Nando, Joe, and the amazing other guy who works with them. So bad. Dean. Sorry, Dean. Dean. Joe, Nancy, and Nancy. I'm not even drunk. I'm drinking water. Joe, Nando, and Dean. Yes, amazing people. We had a very good night out in London a couple of years ago, and a lot of fun. Great people. It was their podcast or their audio picnic I was listening to the other day. So yes, go check it out, guys. Okay. Alison says, can you post a link to Nando's video that you're talking about? I can. Let me find it for you. Here we go. So I think this is the one. copy link. So guys, this is the video that we're talking about. So if you want to watch it, if you go onto the School of Canine Science on Facebook and scroll down their page, and the audio picnic is on there. I think they've done a couple. I haven't had a chance to listen to all of them, but the first one I listened to and really enjoyed. So, okay, let's go carry on. I love you guys. You're all going, it's Dean Chirag, it's Dean. Yes, I see this happens to me. I say it happens to me. My arrangement of my environment may be internal, external, but literally I could be with someone that I know and the name goes blank. Like Nancy, who is a person, amazing trainer behaviorist, who our new program is out tomorrow, Cats and Dogs at War, on Channel 5 Star, 9 p.m. But when I met her, I know her name, Nancy. And then suddenly at one point, literally the name just goes blank. I'm with her and she's like, you forgot my name, haven't you? And I was like, it's not my fault. It's my learning history. But but yeah, so that's a joke that we still laugh about. Anyway, let's carry on from this. Let's move on, Chirag, move on. Okay. Zoe says, I was working in rescue, so it could be me. Perhaps the discussion we talked about cognitive dissonance regards to the way Facebook groups will run places. Becky says, you all got trolleyed following Joe Rose's regulation speech at the House of Parliament. I saw lives of you that night. Yep, that was it. It was after the House of Parliament. Joe Rose gave a fantastic little talk and we went out and had a lot of fun afterwards. I am actually thinking when lockdown's over, if we should just do a big night out. We'll do an event and anyone wants to turn up can turn up and we can meet in person and you can drink, you don't have to drink, and just have lots of fun. And we can say, thank you, Skinner, together. Our first drink, when we're all together and we have a drink, we'll be like, thank you, Skinner. Can't wait for that. We'll definitely organize something in London. Okay, Chirag, come on, focus.
And this will be what we would call motivating. It will lead him to develop more of himself than he's ever developed before, and it will certainly generate a sense of freedom.
In commenting on our system, relying as it does on adversive control, you've commented that our task is not to provide for moral struggle. What did you mean?
Well, when a person has been punished for wrongdoing, we leave it up to him to find out the right thing to do. So we seem to be giving him the chance to originate his own conduct. And he may do that by struggling in the sense of experimenting with ways of life that will not be punished, with punishing himself to emphasize to himself for purposes of self-management what has happened to him in the past and so on. What you go through in trying to find the right thing to do because you've been punished for the wrong thing is what we call moral struggle. Now, if instead of punishing wrong behavior, I make sure that right behavior is highly reinforced, then the right behavior will prevail, the wrong behavior will disappear, but not because of moral struggle.
Like, yes, we need, like, oh, there's so many quotes here. Like, the whole world needs to watch this, I think, in my opinion. Can we get the whole world to just sit there and watch this, please? Like, come on, let's just listen to that bit again.
I make sure that right behavior is highly reinforced thing to do because you've been punished for the wrong, to emphasize to himself for purpose.
So when you're punishing behavior, we leave it to the individual to kind of escape that, escape the negative or the positive punishment, negative punishment contingency presented. So they're in a situation, this child, human, client, your dog or your cat, get off the table, But one sec, we're leaving it up to the learner to try and originate what to do. But why not, like Skinner just said, arrange for successful positive reinforcement rather than get off the table, come on the target. Rather than stop jumping up, sit on the bed. We teach this stuff in dog training, but you heard it here when Skinner said it, I don't know, 50 years ago, maybe more or less, I don't know, somewhere. But you heard it, and just how important is it? Oh.
Of self-management, what has happened to him in the past, and so on.
So the self-management aspect is based on what's happened in the past, the punishment history, and then you go, oh, he managed itself. But actually, he didn't manage himself. The contingencies are what are responsible for the behaviors you're seeing and labeling as self-management. It's not originated inside of him. What's happening is the contingencies are driving that.
What you go through in trying to find the right thing to do because you've been punished for the wrong thing is what we call moral struggle. Now, if instead of punishing wrong behavior, I make sure that right behavior is highly reinforced, then the right...
Focus on reinforcing the right behavior, well, right, wrong. We know we're talking subjective here, so what's right or what's wrong type thing, but the behavior you want to occur, focus on reinforcing that rather than punishing the behavior you don't want to occur. Thank you, Skinner.
Behavior will prevail, the wrong behavior will disappear, but not because of moral struggle. But that is rejected by a great many people in the literature of freedom because it looks like automatic goodness, that you mustn't be good simply because you just naturally tend to be good. You should be good because you've struggled to avoid being bad and have arrived at ways of being good. And that seems to me to be an unnecessary kind of thing. I'd like to have a world in which people just, because of the prevailing social contingencies, do the right thing.
Is responsibility lacking in your system? Personal responsibility?
Well, I think from a scientific point of view, no one is responsible. His genetic endowment and his past history are responsible for what he does.
Genetic endowment and past history, the genetics, the past history, the biology, all of these things are influencing behavior. And what black box are we talking about here? An all-encompassing.
And
sorry,
that means responsible for the bad things he does and the good things he does. But we use the concept of responsibility to punish bad behavior. We hold a man responsible so that he can be justly punished. And we give a man credit for doing the things that he has done which are good. And in other words, we say he is responsible for this work of art or that scientific discovery. But there again also we should trace it back to his genetic endowment and to his earlier history. Now, I don't want to eliminate punitive contingencies if needed. I want people to be held responsible in that sense. I certainly don't mean to forego giving people credit for achievements. I want people to have a sense of that they are responsible for the good things they've done in the world. These are social techniques of management. Scientifically, there is no ultimate responsibility anywhere except at the Big Bang explosion at the beginning of the universe. But the practices which are associated with responsibility have had a place, and they will continue to have a place.
Oh, it's ended. It's sad. Sad. Why is it sad? Because I can't access this reinforcer. I can. I just rewind it and watch it again. And the experience of being with you, all of you live and listening to it. So yes, any confessions or thoughts or thinking behaviors you're engaging in that you wish to make more public of by writing in the comments box? Anyone? Well, it's been an amazing night, guys, or morning. Who cares? We don't need the label, night, morning. It's been very enjoyable, and we shall be doing this again. Oh, Julie has a thought or comment. Hi, Julie. Hello, new BF or old BF or like BFF, little puppy. So cute. We should meet again. I like the thought of never holding a dog responsible. That is a good place to be. But then, Julie, as well, I love your comment. We shouldn't be saying the client is responsible and putting blame on them, because in the same context, behavior is behavior is behavior. So it's not the client's fault. I'm not saying you're saying it's the client's fault by any means, Julie. I just thought it's a good point. Is we're not saying it's the dog's fault. We're not saying it's the client's fault. We're not saying it's the trainer's fault, because we're all under the influence of operant learning, contingencies, learning history, genetic endowment, and our biology. And so it's not about fault, but we can arrange environments to change those behaviors. And so rather than blaming people, let's segregate less, and let's just be one and love each other and be kind to each other. Let's not look for faults that people do, but look for the good things, and look for the things that people do well, and make a point of actually emphasizing those. Because even then, sometimes when it comes to training and behavior, and we go someone, he uses evil methods or she uses evil, well, it's not their fault. I used to put a choke chain on my dog, and like, we do what we know best and what's reinforced, and we somehow, my environment shaped my behavior to think and do things differently and talk about things differently. So I think we need to remember that when we talk about people, because when we talk about people behavior is behavior is behavior. And I love this, especially with Skinner. Listening to Skinner, he's not talking about animal training, he's talking about behavior, and behavior of humans and behavior of non-humans. So with your clients tomorrow, when you talk to your family members, let's try and practice this. And I'm always trying to practice this, not there yet, still got a lot of work to do, but practicing rather than going, oh, that person's at fault or it's their fault. Actually, it's not about fault. And exactly what Julie's saying, not about holding it. Like, let's be more loving and caring, and yes, nice to each other. Thank you, Linda. Oh, you've got a nice, cute little dog as well. I love the color. Oh, Penny. Hello. Two very cute doggies. Behavior is behavior, and that's what we're studying, is behavior. Exactly. Let's not judge. Helen says, he says no automatic goodness, so I'm thinking no expectation of self-control. Yes. Well, I'm just saying yes. I need to maybe think about that a bit more, but yes. Emma says, this has been amazing. I don't like the word fault. Let's be open to learning about everything. Exactly. Everything's learning opportunities. Every day is a school day. I love it. Yeah, exactly. Every day is a school day. Real life school. Yeah, exactly. Your enthusiasm is effective. Obviously can't read. Heather says, your enthusiasm is effective. You are a natural positive reinforcer just by being you. Oh, thank you, Heather. Nicole says, when you know better, you do better. And that goes for us trainers. I recently burned someone's Caesar Milan books I had, but that is true for our clients as well. They don't know what they don't know. Exactly. And I think the more I speak to different trainers and different people, just how much more similarities we have than differences always appear. And so I think even watching our friend on Netflix, the new show, just I was watching it. I watched the whole series, by the way. You can hate on me if you want, but I watched the whole series, and I loved Jazz's behavior around the people he worked with, how he was very, like, the way he coached them, the way he took time to listen and understand them and help them achieve what they're looking for achieving, and without going, like, essentially really empowering most of the people he engaged with and helping them and building them up, and doing such a great job. And you could see, like, just listening to his stories and listening to the background and stuff, that his behavior that will reflect caring towards, like, bettering people and people around, and the type of people is helping. The last episode where he goes to that shelter and takes 4 dogs and helps them and gets them into homes, and the lady who's obviously trying to do her best to help these dogs as well, and just flooded with lots of dogs. And then you could look at the other side and go, well, what did he do to those dogs? And he used like that weird collary thing, the choke chainy, not choke chainy, thin thing around the dog's neck that probably wasn't very nice for the dog. And but we can talk about the differences, or we can talk about, actually, there's lots of things, like, philosophy wise, he seemed like he really wants to help dogs and keep them in homes and keep dogs and people safe. And I think focusing on those, but at the same time, I can come out and share my message to talk about a video here. I don't have to try and bad jazz in his training techniques, but I can talk about, actually, from my perspective in the science I'm looking at, focusing on positive reinforcement and focusing on this. There's a reason to do this and reason to focus on reinforcing punishers. And that's what my learning history has taught me. His learning history is a different learning history to mine. And my opinions are different to his when it comes to training of the dog and how we get there. But in terms of what we're trying to achieve, keeping the dog in the home, helping the dog have a happy life and safe life, and the people, I think there's a lot of similarities as well. So I think rather than just seeing someone and bad mouthing them, let's focus on looking at inclusivity, because when we make things inclusive, people may learn. If we, like, hate on them, then there's no reason for anyone to actually go, oh, that person, that's interesting, I might learn from them. Whereas if we're open, doesn't mean you agree to everything that they say, but you arrange the environment to just maybe plant a seed, or to carry on doing what you're doing without trying to make a point per se. But if you influence behavior by arranging environmental engineers. So we're basically, how do we arrange environments rather than just hating? Don't have to agree with me, but that's my opinion. Thanks for GJ. I love it. GJ. I love it. Such a cool name. Thanks for bringing BF's words to us, so that I can have a better convo with clients versus aversive control and freedom. I love it. So much to think about. Thank you so much. Jane says, feeling motivated. Thank you, Chirag. Emma says, very inspiring. Thank you very much for sharing with us. Nicole says, gosh, I love that philosophy. I tend to get so fired up by watching trainers I don't agree with. I have experienced certain feelings and emotions as well, but then I go, hold on a second, I can arrange my environment and change what is felt, or what is being felt. But I think, yeah, so guys, amazing. Thank you very much. We are going to do this again. I don't know when, but soon. Maybe next Sunday, maybe a different day. Maybe I'll try and plan it rather than just jumping on. But yeah, if you like this, please share it and like it and comment below, and let's spread the word. Let's celebrate BF Skinner's work. Let's celebrate, and not just celebrate it, but let's just show what uses there are in day-to-day work today, and how much it can help our learners and improve the world, be a better place. Bye-bye. Bye-bye, guys. Love you loads.